We're now on Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, and we're listing the things that could bring a person to Tuma, to carry. The first one on the list was Shum, was garlic. Then we have something called Shachalayim, which is in English translated as cress, C-R-E-S-S. Then we have Chal Galoglos, which is called in English purslain. And all these are types of tzmachim that grow, and they have leaves, and they have seeds, and all these parts were eaten. Habeitzim vehagargir. Gargir, he says here, is a tzemach hanikra ben chardal, and in English it's called a rocket. In any event, we see that as far as the Kohen Gadol is concerned, we should not be feeding him these things like an esrog, beitzim, basar shamen, yain yashan, yain lavan, slasos, and we shouldn't be feeding a zav the same kinds of things, because this will bring him to carry. However, on the list of foods that we should avoid as zav, what's obviously missing is esrog and slasos. And there's a whole discussion here why that doesn't appear on the list of foods that should be avoided during the Zayinikim of a zav. The pasuk says in Malachim Beis, Perik Dalid, Vayetze echad el hasadeh lelaket oros, describing a situation of someone who went out to the fields to collect a vegetation, a tzemach, which is called oros. Tana Mishmei Rabbi Meir. What is oros? Ze gargir. This is the rocket plant. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lama Nikrat Shman. Oros, why is it called oros? Lefisha meiros es ha'inayim. If you eat them, then it's very beneficial for your eyesight. Amar Rav Huna Hamotzi Gargir. If a person finds a rocket, im yochel yochlo ochlo, it's beneficial for his eyesight. He should eat it. V'im lav, if he cannot eat it, ma'aviro al gabi einov, he should at least wipe his eyes with it. Amar Rav Papa begargira mitzranana. It's only with regard to a rocket plant that grows on the boundary. There are no other plants of any different species that are growing in close proximity. Ein gedelum tzvivosav zroim acheret. Because if there are other kinds of vegetations that grow in close proximity, there will be makrish es kocho. They will draw from that power of the gargir to give you an improved eyesight. Now, once we mentioned before that eggs can bring a person to Tuma, the Gemara quotes a statement here, Rav Gidol Amarav Achsenai, if a person is a guest in a hotel, and it's not going to be a good thing if he has on the sheets that he's sleeping on a nocturnal emission, because that's going to make a stain, and it's going to be a little bit disgusting for the host to have to find this sheet that's dirty. It's not a good idea to eat eggs as you're a guest in a hotel. And furthermore, certainly, lo yishan b'taliso shel baal bayis. You shouldn't borrow a cloak that would be possibly stained by his nocturnal emission, and that cloak belongs to his host. So when he returns the cloak to his host, and the host is going to send off this cloak to the laundromat, it's kind of a little bit jarring and disgusting. Rav Ki Mikla, now this Gemara defies my understanding. Rav came Lidarshish, to a place called Darshish, and apparently he was used to going there. Machris, when he came into town, he made an announcement. He sent out a message on the local WhatsApp group. Mandahavya liyoma. Is there anyone out there, any woman who would want to be married to me for one day? I have to stay in Darshish for one day. And I promise her, I guarantee her, that after that day, I'll give her a get. And the reason Rav made this declaration to be married to some strange woman who would only volunteer for the job for one day is because when a person is away from his wife, he might be tempted by the Yetzer Hara to have the wrong thoughts, and therefore he wants to have another wife. Rav Nachman did the same thing. Kad mikla le shechaznitz nitziv. That's where he used to frequent on trips. Machris, he would make a similar announcement. Man havi Yoma, which woman out there would be willing to marry me for a day? And after that day, I'll give her a get. I mean, the Mepharshim are also bothered here, the Ben Yehoyada. How could it be that Rav and Rav Nachman were afraid that they would have Hirurim because for one day they're out of town? I mean, these were holy people, saints and tzaddikim. So he claims the Ben Yehoyada, but again, the Gemara doesn't really bear this out, that they didn't really mean this seriously. They were only making it because they found out in those places that the people were not getting married on time. I don't know if you remember the phrase, the Alta Mirrors. There were yeshiva bachrim in the Mir that didn't get married until the 40s. And Rav and Rav Nachman were very much opposed to this. And they wanted to impress the people that if you don't have a wife, it's very hard to control your thoughts and your impulses. And even someone as great as I am, says Rav, I need a wife, kilu, for that 24-hour period that I'm away from home. But in actuality, Rav wasn't afraid of any Yetzer Hara for the one day he was away from his wife. So the Gemara asks, "Asani Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer Lo Yisa Adam Isha ben Zina Zuvi Yelech V'Yisa Isha ben Mina Acheres." You're not allowed to marry a woman in another far-off country because maybe you'll have children from that woman, and unbeknown to them, they have brothers or sisters, back in the first place, the first location. Shemi is Davguzel, and maybe they'll marry each other, not even realizing that they are brother and sister. This is an incest relationship. And Nimtza, ach nose achoso, umemalek eskola olam kulo b'mamzeros. B'mamzeros. Right? If a brother has a relationship with his own sister, that child is a mamzer or mamzeres. And as a result of the fact that he's carrying on two families in two different countries, you never know what could happen. And this Gemara seems to assume that there might be a natural desire to have a relationship with your own sister. I mean, after all, you have so many genetic similarities, but you have no clue that this is your sister. So how could Rav or Rav Nachman, for that matter, do such a thing? Al zenemar umala haaretz zima. The whole land is full of incestuous relationships. The Gemara answers, Rabbanan kala islahu. Whenever someone is married to a great chacham, the word gets out. This is not something that's kept secret. And therefore, anyone who's born from this marriage relationship between Rav and a woman, wherever it is, out in Darshish, they will know that that child is the son of Rav. And it's very well known, wherever the son goes, he's the son of Rav. So he's not going to marry his close relative. So the Gemara asks, you have another problem in justifying the behavior pattern of Rav and Rav Nachman, because they couldn't get married to a woman in the same day that they invited and proposed to that woman for marriage, because the law is that in any case that you propose marriage to a woman, she has to wait Zayin Nikiyim. That's called Dam Chimud. This question came up a lot during Corona, because she gets very emotional as we get close to marriage and the intimacy of marriage, and the whole system goes awry, fluke, and she'll have we have to make sure that she counts Zayin Nikiyim for at least a minimum of a week before he actually marries her. So the Gemara answers, Rabbanan, these Chachamim, Rav and Rav Nachman, Oduye Havi Modulahu, they sent word to Darshish or Shchansiv way in advance. They had their appointment schedule worked out. They knew in a month's time they would have to be in that place. They sent out a cruise, a notification that a woman who's interested in getting married to Rav or to Rav Nachman a month from now will prepare herself for such. Again, I don't know what would happen if more than one woman applied for the position. I don't know. Anyway, is Miktam Avi Machtame, even before they arrived in that town, way in advance, Umeshadri Shluche, they sent out the crews, the Shluchim came and notified, so the women were well prepared in advance. We don't have to worry about Dam Chimud, and we don't have to apply the principle of Rava that she requires Zayin Nikiyim. Ibois Ema, the Gemara now gives another explanation. And according to this explanation, we have a little bit more of a consolation to our wondering about how Rav would marry a woman for one day. Then in truth, they never actually consummated the marriage. They designated a woman, whichever woman volunteered for the position, as their marriage partner, but they never actually had that intimate relationship. So they don't have to worry about maybe she's a nida, because although she was earmarked for him, he never actually would, have a sexual relationship with her. So then the Gemara implies the following question. The whole enterprise seems to be a joke then. I mean, the whole purpose of this one-day marriage was so that if he had Rav Nachman had a Yetzer Hara, he would be able to, implement that intimacy. But now you're telling me that he only designated her. And the Gemara answers, the fact that he knew in his mind that she agreed to marry him, and therefore, if need be, he could have this outlet for the impulse of the Yetzer Hara, that itself would remove that impulse, and it would not be an intense desire that would have to worry about the possibility that he would actually implement an act of intimacy. And this leads us to the Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis. The Mishnah continues the study of the Seder Kohen Gadol and his avoda in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Kippur, and beginning with Erev Yom Kippur when Masru Ziknei Bezdin Liziknei Kahuna. After the Ziknei Bezdin, as we said before, the members of Sanhedrin spent that entire week with the Kohen Gadol, training him and teaching him and reviewing the halachas. Now they're ready to transfer the Kohen Gadol, to give him over to the hands of the Zichrei Kahuna. And the Zichrei Kahuna were here, the elders with great experience from past Yom Kippurims, were able to train the Kohen Gadol in the most complicated avoda of the day, and that's called Chafina and Haktoras. And now the Ziknei Kahuna would be in charge of training the Kohen Gadol. They went into a certain chamber called the Lishkas Beis Avtinus. That was the family that produced the Ketores, and they had a special chamber in the Beis Hamikdash. The Kohen Gadol would show up over there, and the Ziknei Kahuna would train him in the Seder of Chafinas Torres of Yom Kippurim, and therefore Halul Beis Avtinus, Aliyas Beis Avtinus, and that's where they manufactured the Torres, and there they would teach him how to achieve and implement the Chafina. And this was all under the supervision now of the Ziknei Kahuna that took over for the Ziknei Bezdin. And now we get to the famous Shvuah. You may remember this from the Seder Avoda that we repeat in the Musaf service on Yom Kippur. It's in the Machzorim. Hishbi'u, the Ziknei Kahuna, when it came to the Ketores, they were very nervous that he wouldn't do this properly, because maybe he owed his allegiance, Chas v'Shalom, to that movement called the movement of the Tzdokim, and they had a different way of doing the Ketores. So now, in order to guarantee that this Kohen Gadol was not a Tzdoki, and he would not do the avoda of the Ketores like the Tzdokim, they imposed an oath upon him. And Niftaru v'holchu lehem. And after they imposed the oath, then they dropped out. Now, what was the content of that oath? Amrulo, Ishi Kohen Gadol, Anu Shluchei Bezdin, the Atem Shluchenu. We are representing the Bezdin that's in charge of the well-being of all of Israel, and we are their shluchim, and you are our shluchim. Mashpiyim anu alecha. We are now imposing upon you an oath that you'll have to accept. B'misha shikein shmo b'bayis hazeh, in the name of He who is Mashra the Shechina on this house, the Almighty. Shelo tishaneh davar mikol masha amarnu lecha. You will not change and deviate from any of the instructions that we gave you. And after the shvu was taken, hu parishu bocher, the Kohen Gadol would break down in tears. Heim parishinu bochin, and they start crying on the fact that they suspected him, this great Kohen Gadol, of being a tztoki chas v'sholom, and they would machbia him. And now the Mishnah goes on to tell us that they would not allow the Kohen Gadol to sleep that night. He had to do an all-night mishmar on the night of Yom Kippur. And im hayachacham, they have to occupy the Kohen Gadol to make sure that he doesn't fall asleep. If the Kohen Gadol is a chacham and he knows how to darshan the halacha, dorish, he will be the active teacher and he'll be dorish during the course of the entire night. But v'im lav, if he's not capable of doing so, maybe he's a Talmid Chacham, maybe he's able to understand the halacha, but he cannot teach the halacha, he's not on that madrega, is then Talmidei Chacham Darshim Lefana. Then the scholars would be the ones who teach the drasha. In Ragil Likros, if he's capable of reading from Kisvei HaKodesh, Kore, he should be active, as we said. If you are the reader, there's less of a chance that you'll fall asleep. In Lav, if unfortunately he's not Ragil Likros, and again during Baisheni that could be very relevant, is then Korin Lefonav, they'll read from Tanakh. Ubamek Korin Lefonav. Which parts of Tanakh will keep the Kohen interested, will capture his interest so he won't fall asleep, he'll hang on to every word. Number one, be Eov. Again, Eov is a pretty sad story, but nevertheless, it's a very intriguing book with a lot of nuances. That's going to catch the attention of the Kohen Gadol. And then be Ezra. It could be that because Ezra is written in Aramaic, it's easier for the Kohen Gadol to understand it. Or more likely because there are many glorious chapters in Ezra that deal with the Beis HaMikdash and the rebuilding of the second Mikdash. Ubedivrei Yomi. Divrei Yomim has a lot of genealogy and a lot of history. It's Mochech Es Halev. It keeps him alert and prevents him from falling asleep. And Zechariah ben Kvutal, the Gemara is going to wonder whether his father's name was Kvutal with a Pei or Kvutal with a Vav. Omer Pa'amim Harbe Karisi Lefana Bidvanil. And this Zechariah was a well-known Chacham, and he chose to read in front of the Kohen Gadol Sefer Zechariah, and the Yerushalmi adds Sefer Mishlei, Sefer Tehillim, and again, all these are studies that will hopefully keep the Kohen Gadol awake.